All right. Hey guys, good afternoon. Afternoon. Today we are talking about overcoming objection. So as a small business owner, we tend to face quite a bit of challenges when it comes to pushback. So a lot of times clients will say, make up excuses as to why they don't want to close a deal or pursue the transaction. So, it's one of those things that we have to be aware of some of the objections that we're going to face. One of the key things is to know exactly what they might say, exactly what might they object. So one of the most important things is to be aware of the objections that you might face. What is it that my client might say to avoid completing transaction? Today we have a guest host. I'm going to invite him in, Dan the Man. Here we go. Hold on. Guys, I'm not great at the lives yet. Still struggle. Here we go. A realtor with Zolo Realty. He's coming in. Hey, Daniel.
Hey, good afternoon. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm all right. Day's going pretty slow today, but it's all right. I'm going to be busy later. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. Well, guys, this is Daniel. He is a realtor with Zola Realty, and Daniel actually assisted me in selling my house. So I thought it would be a great opportunity to have him on to talk about client objections because I was an easy person to deal with when selling my house, and there was quite a number of objections that I had, and Dan was able to overcome every single one of them. Like if I had one answer, he had 10 back for me. So I want to talk to you today about client objections. So as a realtor, first of all, how long have you been doing this for? How long have you been a realtor for?
I've been in the industry for 5 years.
For 5 years. Awesome.
Yeah.
So you have experienced quite a number of objections and people trying to, make excuses as to why they may not want to sell their house or even with some of the offers, right?
Yep. Yep.
What would you say are some of the common phrases that people or common objections that people tell you when you're want to sell their house or buy the house, whichever?
Well, number one thing is always the price point. Like if it's a buyer, they would have a specific price point in mind, but what they want to buy does not fall within the criteria of that price range that they're looking for. As a seller, sometimes it can be the price point that they want to sell their property at. And also I find is that they normally have their own kind of perspective that they're working with instead of looking at the market. Like for example, nowadays, like it's one of those situations where it's like instead of buying a specific property that you want, you try to get into what you can, so that way you get your foot through the door. And I find a lot of buyers, because of misconception they have around real estate, we have to kind of overcome certain objections, like the price point, for example. Like if a client has to pay a little bit more for the value that they're looking to get, we have to kind of present the facts as to why they have to pay that price.
Okay, so then and that's very true because even right now the market changing, it's very hard to keep up with all the changes, right? And it's one of those things that it's important to align reality with expectations, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times people's expectations aren't really aligned with reality. So
Correct.
with that being said, how do you go about addressing objection? So with the price, for example, when people want to say pay something lower or their budget isn't up to par with the actual market or for what they want, how do you go about addressing that objection?
Well, first things first, I try to get to the root of everything. I don't like to just say, hey, you want to buy a house? Let's go buy a house, right? I want to know what's the reasoning behind buying a house, right? I want to know what have you done to prepare to buy a house? And, I want to understand the big picture before we can actually go and start looking at houses, right? So that allows me to kind of understand the client's needs, with which I can actually address it properly. So most of the time when a client has an objection, it's not because they don't want to do something. It's just because there's something that's kind of deterring them from doing it. And when you know the background as to why they decided to take the step they did, it's easier to align their need with the want. Like most of the time in terms of the price point, if a client's not looking to move because they're saying, hey, I want to work with, let's say, 550,000, and what they're looking to get is in the $650,000 range, but right now they're in a one-bedroom apartment in Scarborough, and the need for space is there. Them hanging on to that objection is just going to cost them the comfort of living space. Another thing is, in real estate, no matter when you get in, it's not like stocks where they fluctuate and the price drops. As long as you can secure a property and you hold on to it for the next little while, you're bound to make some profit on it, plus you build equity, right? So as long as you understand the customer's needs, it's easier to deal with their objections, because most of the time it's one of the biggest transactions they're making in their life. So it's natural to have some objections. It's not like you're buying a car or you're buying shoes or a cell phone. You're buying a property. And for a lot of people, it's a huge transaction. And it's normal to have cold feet. It's normal to have second thoughts. It's normal to have buyer's remorse. That's why it's important to educate them on every step, the whole process, before they even go through the process, so they understand everything. So if there's any objections, you forecast them ahead of time so you can address them. So when you are in the process of negotiations, your client's not having any cold feet, and they're able to actually, proceed with the transaction with confidence. So I like to be proactive instead of reactive. So I like to have these conversations ahead of time. I like to go over every possible scenario that I can think of, so the client's mentally prepared to make that transaction, to make that leap into home ownership, or to make that leap into selling the home and then, going to the next phase, or whatever it may be. I don't like to be reactive, because I think that's, not being prepared. I like to go by the 5 Ps. Someone told me about those. The 5 Ps are proper. You know what? I'll get back to the 5 Ps later.
Plan properly prevents something.
Proper planning prevents poor performance.
Yeah, there you go. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't remember that.
Yeah.
And you said 2 key things. One is being prepared. So asking the right questions, like the program questions, to know exactly what their needs are. Because a lot of times I find that in a sales transaction, even something simple as going into a clothing store, it's a thing of the past now. But when I used to go into a clothing store, there's some salespeople that would say, what are you looking for? Is there an event coming up? Is it a special occasion? Probing simple questions, so that way they can lead me into the right section and get the right suggestions. Whereas some other people, they just say, we have a sale going on, and it's just so general, but it's not to what your actual needs are in that moment. Right? So knowing beforehand what their needs are, so that you can appropriately address them, makes a huge difference, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So it does make a huge difference there in terms of preparing.
With the need to want scenario, another thing is that someone can want like a $1.5 million mansion, but all they really need is like a townhome, which has a little backyard, some extra bedroom space, some extra living space, right? We all want to live in big homes, but that's a want. That's not a need, right? Yeah. So in the process of a want, people try to chew off more than they can bite, bite off more than they can chew. And I think that's the key here, is to align their need, because as long as they live with their needs, they don't have to be house poor. They can still go on vacations. They can still get those Amazon packages delivered, right? You just don't want to do something for the sake of doing it. You want to understand why you're doing it, and you want to have a bigger picture in mind. Another thing I like to have is a little roadmap for my clients, right? So we know where we stand and what phase are we on, so that way we're able to proceed accordingly. And again, like, that gives them comfort knowing that, okay, this is the step we're at. And I find that, going back to the original thing, for a lot of people, it's the first time they're selling a property, or it's the first time they're buying a property. So it's an overwhelming experience. And that's where we come in. And we're here to help them facilitate. We're not here to tell you what to do. We're here to help you guide to making the right decision. We're here to protect your interests. And we're here to, provide you the facts, the data that backs the decision that you're making. A lot of times, a lot of people I find in the industry to try to kind of influence the people's decisions. I don't like doing that. If we have to walk away from a deal, we walk away from a deal. As long as my client's comfortable, that's what that matters. And for me to get my client to the comfort stage, I have to make sure that they're prepared ahead of time. And, in your case as well, you had your reservations. And of course, if you remember, we reflected back to what the need was, what was the reasoning behind we were taking the step. And once we were able to, be on the same page, you understood why we had to do what we had to do, and we proceeded with the transaction from there. And again, being proactive, understanding all the options during the negotiations, prior to negotiations, after the negotiations, even on the closing day. So you need to understand all your options before you can proceed, and being prepared is the key.
Yeah, and the second point that you mentioned was risk and setting those expectations, right? Because as a person, a homeowner, I'm not a realtor. I don't know. A lot of times we make emotional buys, right? We sell things emotionally, we buy things emotionally, especially when it comes to a house, right? So you're not really thinking of the reality. So I think that where you came in is that you aligned a lot of the reality to me and kind of took out that emotional part, right? And sometimes when you're the person involved directly, it's hard for you to see and align those
Correct.
expectations, because it's like you're making an emotional buy. It's an emotional move, right? So I think that definitely setting the expectations beforehand, laying out all the risk, all the possibilities, all the pros, all the cons makes a huge difference in objection, because then the person on the other end, your client that you're assisting at that point, they can make a sound decision, a comfortable decision, like you said. And that's the
Correct.
most important thing, because the last thing you'd want is to have any remorse or any ill feeling after the fact to say, okay, well, I didn't feel good about that, right? Because that's
Yep.
going to be hard to reverse. Like you said, being proactive, prevention is better than cure. Or wait, is it cure? How does it go again? Cure is better than prevention. Prevention better than cure. Yeah, I was right. And that makes a huge difference with the whole transaction, because at the end of the day, you want to make sure your client's comfortable with the huge decision that they're making. Because buying a home, selling a home is one of the biggest decisions that most people make in their natural life, right? So I think that's really important to lay out all the expectations, the pros, the cons, let them know if they go this way, this is what could happen. If you go that way, this is what the other alternatives that can happen. And at least then they're more comfortable with the decision, and it's not you pushing the decision on them, because a lot of times salespeople, they get really pushy, right? A lot of times it's just about the sale, and you can sense that as a consumer. You can sense when someone's just trying to push a sale, and it's not for my own benefit. You just want to close a deal, you just want to make a sale, right? So it makes a huge difference in the transaction itself. And like I said, all the objections, all my concerns that I had throughout that entire process, you address that, right? And most of them, even especially because I think we sold during COVID, and that's when it just started. And you're like, nope, I have COVID precautions laid out. I already have a waiver. So you're really proactive in that. And that made a huge difference, because I was still living in my home at the time of the sale, and I didn't want my family to be exposed, on the onset of COVID at the time. So being proactive makes a huge difference in terms of addressing those, or minimizing the objections, right? So in terms of using, objections, is there any techniques? You said that you're proactive. You kind of ask probing questions. Is there any other techniques that you could think of that are important in terms of addressing objections? So say, for example, it's an objection that you didn't foresee, and now they're objecting to something. Say, for example, one common one that I know of is someone says, well, I have to ask my husband about it, or my wife about it. How do you go about addressing that?
So again, the key is listening, right? So when you first meet your clients, you need to understand who the key decision makers are. So that way, when you are in that important part of the transaction, you're sitting down with all the key decision makers, so that way they're all available in one place. So that way they can discuss things among themselves, as well as you're there to discuss with them as well as a group. So if someone says they want to speak to their husband, naturally, I try to actually have everybody in the room together. But if they don't want to be in the room together, I try to have separate conversations with them and kind of explain everything, so they both understand everything that's going on, and then give them time to discuss things among themselves before I further proceed to talk to them about the situation, so that way they're on the same page. Because once the key decision makers are on the same page, it's easier to actually convey the information. And I find that that's the best way to go about, because you don't want to be talking to one decision maker while the other decision maker is in the dark, because that can create an odd situation, right? Because we're all in this together. We have to work together. We have to have open communication. And that's pretty much where I start. If someone has objections in terms of, the price point they want to sell the property at, we again go based on a fact-based conversation. We look at the comparables, what's going on in the area. If it's a purchase, then we go based on the numbers as well. At the end of the day, we're in a numbers-based world. All the data is available to us these days, 2021 now, and it's you know, a data-driven world that we live in. So as long as the data is available to back up what we're saying, you know, it's easy to make that transaction. Of course, if an emotional buy or if an emotional sale, then it's a different situation as well. But even then, you don't allow anyone to make a hasty decision. If emotions are high at that point, you know what, we take a break and we revisit this topic once it's time for, you know, once we're cooled off and once we can actually sit down and think about it thoroughly and logically. Because I'm here to make sure that we're not making any decisions that we're either going to regret or we're going to make hasty decisions. Like you said, like a lot of salespeople, they're in it for the transactions. I'm not in it for the transactions. I'm in it for people, because I found that there was a lack of, you know, care that was in the industry, like seeing my parents dealing with realtors growing up and, you know, other people. I mean, till this day, I hear some stories and it irks me, you know, just because I feel like if a person is trusting you with the biggest investment of their life, you need to make sure you go above and beyond, and going above and beyond and understanding their needs, listening to them from day one to the last day, being there for them every step of the way, no matter what time of the day it is. If there's any objections, you're not just coming at it from your own standpoint, right? You're not putting your own emotions and your own thought process. You're putting yourself in that person's shoes and understanding where they're coming from. Because once you understand the other person's perspective, it's easier to actually help them understand what's going on. And that's the key. I mean, to me, I have an agile approach to these things. I don't, like, every person's different. Every personality is different. I love, like, all kinds of people that I deal with in the industry. And there's no one way of handling an objection. But the number one thing I can say is listening is key. Because when you listen, that's when you understand. And when you're understanding, that's when you really understand what they're objecting and you're able to bypass it. I mean, I'm not here to use words to fluff things up and, you know, get you to sign the paperwork. I'm here to actually listen and understand to you and, you know, kind of get to the deeper root of that objection, right? Because if you get to the deeper root and you address that, the objections no longer exist. I mean, just like anything else, right? You want to buy a house, you want 4 bedrooms, but you want a laundry on the 2nd floor, right? Okay, why do you want a laundry on the 2nd floor? So it's easier because my kids, you know, my bedroom's there, I can, you know, do that and whatnot. Okay, that's perfectly fine. So now a lot of newer homes, they actually are coming with laundries on the 2nd floor. So you know what, Suzette, it may be a better idea for us to kind of hold off on these homes for now, so we can find the newer homes that, you know, have the features that you're looking for. And having said that, then we will also have to have a conversation about the price point, because now clearly if you're going from a little bit older home to, let's say, under 2-year, 3-year, 5-year-old home, it's going to be a different price point involved as well. So now I prepare you for that aspect, right? So I show you both situations, say, hey, okay, this home does not have your laundry on the 2nd floor. And, you know, I understand what you're saying, but it has the laundry in the basement, but the price point's at this here, right? This home is newer, it has what you're looking for, but now with the price point, it's almost $150,000, $200,000 extra. Now, are you open to allowing that laundry placement to translate into $200,000, right? Yeah. So now, you as a human being are like, hey, $200,000 is a lot of money. If I was to go out and make it, it's going to take me some time. So I'll take a walk downstairs, you know? I'll get my steps in on my Fitbit. So, you know, it's stuff like that, right? So it's just kind of like positioning things and needs and wants, going back to the earlier thing, and being proactive, right? So this is why I like to kind of like understand the client's need ahead of time before we even proceed. Because in certain times, if it does not make sense, let's not even bother proceeding with something, right? Because if your current situation is better than what you're planning on getting into, then maybe you should, you know, stick around for a bit and go from there.
I definitely think it's important to put things into perspective, again, expectations, because it makes the transaction easier for yourself and especially for the client, right? Because like you said, when you break it down that way and you say, you know, on a dollar figure, is it worth $200,000 to have laundry upstairs versus downstairs? It changes it. But if someone, say, for example, is a special needs person and they need to have a bungalow, something where everything's on one floor, well, that's a different story, right? That's not really an option there. So it's definitely important to know their needs beforehand, so that way you can address and avoid any objections, right? You mentioned earlier that you're not about the sales, it's more about the people, it's more about the clients and their transactions. Why is that? Why does that matter more to you? Because obviously the sales, like, I mean, you're a businessman, so sales do matter, but you're saying that your clients matter more than the actual money. And I know that from experience and dealing with you. So why is that important to you in the long term, right? Because somebody might be watching and say, well, you're a salesperson. Why why don't you care about the sales? Not don't care, but why is it not a priority for you?
It's not a priority because I see that the care part lacking in the industry, right? I've had people call me after the fact of a transaction and ask me questions about certain things and say, hey, I went through this and what's your take on it? And, I said, hey, where's your realtor? And it's like, oh, well, after the things firmed up, I haven't heard from my realtor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or, you know what I mean? Like I haven't heard from a realtor. Now I'm looking for answers, right? Like I said, like growing up, I've seen my family, my parents go through real estate transactions with real estate agents, and it always felt like it was a transaction-based thing. If some sort of issue comes up after, it's like, oh, well, it is what it is. The realtor's nowhere to be found. Go talk to the lawyer. It's not my problem, not me, right?
Yeah.
So for me, it's like this. At the end of the day, everyone's working hard for their money, right? We all work, everyone works. There's families, there's immigrant families, there's non-immigrant families. Pretty much people go through a lot to get to their first home, right? And you want to make sure that experience for them to get into their home is a good one, right? After they move in, they're actually enjoying themselves. And if it's just a transaction base, it's not like, hey, listen, you know what? This person likes this home, but I can visually tell that they're going to have issues when they move in there. And I can tell they're not the type of DIY type of people. But you know what? I'm going to close this transaction anyways because I care about the money and not the people. Now, guess what? They're going to move into the house. They're going to have to deal with all these issues, right? That I saw visually or I can forecast it's going to be occurring. And they're not going to enjoy their home, right? They're not going to feel good about their biggest transaction they just made. And chances are they're not going to feel good about you either, right? So I'm big on energy and vibes and positive energy. And I like to walk away from a transaction with everybody feeling good about it. And hence why people is a big portion for me. And again, we're in a business where every other person is a realtor and every person knows real estate, so when you put people first, people put you first, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want you to be like, hey, call Dan because he sold my house and he just got it done. I want you to tell people to call Dan because, hey, Dan is the type of person who would tell you what everything is for what it is, like for face value. I'm not going to fluff things up for you. I want you to trust in me, right? Because if we need to walk away from a transaction, I'm okay with it, right? I want to be that person that you can trust in to be like, hey, I want to walk away from this. Sure, let's walk away, right? If I'm going to be transaction-based, that's not the attitude I'm going to get from my clients because people can pick up when you're just being pushy, when you're, when you have an alternative motive or you're just trying to do something for the sake of doing it. And a lot of people do it in every industry, doesn't matter. It could be a doctor, it could be a mechanic, it could be anything. And because that part is dying out, like that I'm seeing in general, because everything is money-based, that's why I find it's more important for me to be more people-based over transactions. Because you know what? Transactions is going to happen anyways. It's the people's interest that needs to be protected.
Yeah, it's a client experience, right? That's one of the things that it's a journey there. Because like you said, you have to live somewhere. So eventually you're gonna find a home, you're gonna buy a home, but it's not about that, it's about that experience. And in the long term, it's one of those things that you stay on the person's mind, right? It's like, oh wow, you actually, because even with me, after a transaction was done, you followed up for like months after. You called me, hey, how's it going? How's the new place? And that made a huge difference to me because in the end, I was like, oh. Like he still cares. He's still checking up on me. Like he didn't move on to the next. Well, you did move on to the next, but I mean, like you still remember it. you still remember it, and that makes a huge difference. That's longer lasting in the end, right? So I think that's really important. Is that the client's journey? A lot of times people just see the end. They're like, okay, what's the dollar amount? Let's push for the most expensive house, even if it's out of the person's budget. And then, like you said, the person's gonna have bad feelings, and then bad feelings about the transaction, about the purchase, about you. And bad news spreads faster than water. That's one of the things you don't want there for your business as well, because as nicely as someone can, promote you, people will definitely say, hey, I had a horrible transaction, don't go with this person, right? So that's another thing to always keep in mind is that, okay, what are the long-term effects of the transaction, right? How am I going to make this person feel thereafter? And is it good for my business? Is it good for my brand, for my outlook, right? So it makes a huge difference. And people will refer you, right? That's a huge thing too. And then that makes your life easier in the end because now you can get to a point where you're just getting referrals because you're that good. And then repeat clients as well, because then later on down the road, if they have kids and now they need a bigger house because of that great transaction they had with you, then they'll come right back to you, right? So it makes a huge difference. And I definitely agree with you 100% on everything that you said. So is there anything that you want to say in closing in terms of like any common mistakes that you see people making, or is there anything that you want to leave out there with some business owners in terms of how to overcome objection?
Don't be pushy. Never try to push a person into doing something they're not comfortable doing. Make
Yeah.
sure that the comfort level is there before things proceed. If offer needs to expire, if that, specific situation needs to not occur at that specific time, it's okay. It'll happen eventually. Let it happen naturally. Don't push it. Because if you push it, and even if you make it through the door, guess what? If the other person was not 100% with you, that still can come back to you, right? Whether it be in a bad news spreading like fire situation, or whether it be like some sort of mistake that was made at your end or something they're not comfortable with, they're going to file a complaint against you, whatever the case may be. Never be pushy. We're not here to push products, or we're not here to push properties. You're not here to, hey, listen, my customer wants this. I'm gonna make sure to sign this. No. You're here to align the right thing with the right person. And in order for you to do that, you can't be pushy.
Yeah.
And you also have to forecast customers' needs ahead of what they want. Like, for example, if it's a young couple, guess what? They're going to have a kid or two in the future. So you bring that up and say, hey, I know you want to buy this 2-bedroom condo or 1-bedroom condo right now, but what's your 5-year goal, right? Yeah. Because, again, that's what we're here for. So if you're going to buy a place and I know you're going to have a kid, I'd rather you get an additional bedroom or a bigger space ahead of time, so that way you're ready, instead of you having to, once it's time for the kid to come and you're like, oh my God, like now I need more space. We need a nursery, we need a backyard, So don't be pushy, be proactive, and think from the customer perspective. Always. Amen. These 3 things is what I try to go by. Because if I understand your perspective and I'm proactive, I'm ready for anything. And not only I'm ready for anything, I'm going to educate you so you're ready for everything as well. So you're comfortable with the whole process, and you feel comfortable, and you're not worried about making the wrong step, and you can trust in me to make sure if you do try to go in the wrong direction, I'm here to guide you back to the right direction. Right? So listen, don't be pushy, and be proactive. Those 3 things are the key.
That's amazing. 100% agree with you. It's all about the experience. It's not about the end transaction, because it's that's longer term affecting, right? So I definitely agree with you. Dan, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I hope everyone definitely got some great tips. I'm going to post this and tag you on my story. So thank you so much for coming in today.
Hey, thank you for having me. Take care. Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye.